Let's face it, I'm a small-time YouTuber. And don't get me wrong, I'm proud of what I do. And over the years, I've become a good content creator, but nobody recognizes me in public. I'm not raking in millions of views, and I work a full-time job because the YouTube life cannot sustain my family financially. Yet. So if I'm no big deal, why do I keep getting top-tier guests on both of my podcasts? Well, my name is Patrick, and I help everyday creators like you and me succeed. Let me tell you how. A while ago, I started 2 podcasts. One of those podcasts is called Create, Post, Repeat, where I talk about the content creation journey and the creative process with creatives that I admire and respect. And I have no business talking with someone like Sean Cannell. He's the CEO of Think Media, a huge YouTube channel, but I just finished an interview with him, and you can check that out by clicking the link in the description. Humor Bagel shouldn't know my name or have my phone number, but he does, and he has a community of 3 million subscribers. Omar El Takrori should not respond to my messages on Instagram, but he does. We finished our interview and we're already planning a second one because it went so well. I mean, I gotta say, all of the interviews went quite well. And for my full-time job, I work as a worship pastor at a church in New York City. Now, that's a space I've been leading in since the age of 13. So this is easy content for me to create since I exist inside of it day to day. And these names may not mean a ton to you, but I've had interviews with John Tyson, Tyler Staton, Brett Yonker, Carlos Whitaker, and other names who are well known inside this niche. So how? Well, friends, like any good pastor, we're going to move through the 4 P's of landing big time guests for your podcast. And number 1 is proximity. You want to start with anyone you can potentially get close to. In my 41 years of life, I've gained so many relationships with people I'm very fond of, and probably some that I'm not so fond of, but that's another video for another day. I also happen to live and work full-time in New York City, which is a hotbed of professionals in every field, whether that's Broadway or tech space or crypto or, as New York does, so does the rest of the world. So I use all of that to my advantage. That's how I got to interview Brett Yonker and my good friend John Tyson for my Undignified Worship podcast. Link below. Both of these guys are very well known in their space. They're voices that people want to hear from. Little does everyone know that I happen to be friends with both of them, having worked together years ago for a long period of time. And for the Create, Post, Repeat podcast, naturally, I reached out to my friend Wesley Taylor, who's been a Broadway star, director, producer, and actor for years. Additionally, his sister was my girlfriend in 6th grade, so I had that going for me, so, romance.
How's bragging camp going?
I also reached out to Griffin Matthews. Griffin's an actor on the show Flight Attendant as well as She-Hulk. He's in the MCU for crying out loud. And I used to sing with Griffin at my church. Here's my point. You probably have friends and acquaintances around you that are crushing it in your niche. And you probably have friends and acquaintances around you who are close to someone who's crushing it in your niche. The worst thing they could say is no. One word of warning here. Your pals won't expect your podcast to be serious. If someone's doing a favor to one of their friends that's doing a favor for you by reaching out to them and connecting you, they probably won't expect your podcast to be super serious, and they probably won't take it very serious. They will think that you want to just have a good time and that you're super impressed that you get to have a conversation with them, which I'm not opposed to having a great time, and I am super excited to talk to these people. But later on, I'm going to give you a few tips for upping the professionalism, not one of our P's, but it is a word that starts with P. Later on, I'm going to give you some tips for upping the professionalism of your podcast. Implementing these tools and applying them to every interview you schedule is going to help your guests understand how you are here for a good time, but you also take this seriously. Sneak peek tip: don't use Zoom for your interview. Zoom is bad. Zoom is bad. It looks bad. It sounds bad. So what should you use? Well, stay tuned. Our next P is persistence. This is the toughest one. Using all of your degrees of separation is as easy as sending emails and texts. This tends to be pretty casual, and you still need to be persistent, but when you reach out to bigger names that you're not friends with, persistence is key. I never want to bother anyone, but I'm a firm believer in asking until you hear a definitive no. And the good news is that most of the people I interact with are content creators or church people. They don't ever use condescending language on purpose, and it's hard to get them to give a firm no. They'll say things like, well, at this time, it's not a huge interest for me. You don't often hear no. So that door is, at the very least, always just a little bit open for you to circle back and ask them for an interview at a later time. And I've found that Instagram is the best place to do this.
Wow.
If there's a big name I want to interview, I ask them, like I said, until they say no. Now, many of these big name comment sections, or even their accounts as a whole, are run by assistants or staff members. So, like I said, persistence is key. Remember, you are the small fish going after a bigger fish. For instance, I recently interviewed Sean Cannell. Now, Sean is the Think Media CEO. If you're in the content creation space, you know who Think Media is. If you've ever Googled what camera to use for YouTube or how to make shorts, you've at least seen a Think Media thumbnail pop up in your YouTube algorithm. And I had no business talking to Sean, a CEO of a 8-figure media company who he himself is a millionaire, followed by hundreds of thousands of people, millions of subscribers on YouTube, no business. Now, he never responded to me on Instagram, but since I follow him and kept up with it, I noticed that he signed up for Instagram Threads and began posting. This was, at the time, Threads, a smaller, newer platform. So he hosted a Q&A on Threads where he asked, "What content creation questions do you, my followers, have?" And many people responded. My response was, "Will you ever record a podcast with me?" So after sending him over a dozen messages on Instagram he never responded to, I now had him on a smaller platform responding to direct questions from his followers. I was shocked when I got an email from his assistant asking for some possible dates where we could record. Actually, they didn't email me and say, "When do you want to record?" He actually responded to my question by saying, "How many episodes does your podcast have?" And since I follow him closely, I regurgitated back to him tips and tricks he had been telling his followers about podcasting and content creation. I responded with, "Well, as you've taught us, Sean, I didn't release the podcast until I had at least 10 episodes. And at this point, we're far beyond that." Isn't that great? Now, here's the secret. While I'm waiting for a yes from a big fish like Sean, I'm actively looking at the people who follow Sean. Instead of only looking at the A list in your niche, move down to the C or D list of people in your niche who don't have nearly the same amount of followers as your big fish. They still have that blue check mark though. When I finally got a response from Sean, I was able to say, "Hey, I've interviewed Omar El-Takrori, who works with you at Think Media. You can check out that interview here." And I sent him the link. Persistence is key. Number 3, patience. Obviously, this requires a ton of it. Patience. And to be frank, it requires thick skin. You're going to hear no a lot, and that's okay. And as a matter of fact, like I said earlier, sometimes you don't hear no, you just hear a version of no that's way more long-winded. And again, it's okay. There's this quote, "Life is like photography. You need the negatives to develop." Cheesy, but true. All of this is learning. Okay, one more quick story. I reached out to a creator, Nick Goodner, whom I deeply admire. He told me that he always gets asked to do podcasts, and he says yes rarely. I said, "Thank you so much." That was his version of a no, right? So I said, "Thank you so much for even responding," and I chalked it up as a learning experience. Now, not long after that, he posted this. Basically, he said, "I get asked to be on podcasts a lot, and I won't do them unless you meet this criteria." This was my shot. So I didn't let the no make me walk away. I continued to follow Nick, continued to learn from him. And when I saw that he needed this criteria to do a podcast interview, I said, "Well, here you go." So I sent him this message. I met every piece of criteria he asked for. And it was funny because we even talked about this during our interview and we had a blast laughing about it. Again, life is like photography. You need the negatives to develop. So once we finally get some of our heroes to say yes, we come to our final P, which is preparation. And this will set you apart as an interviewer, no matter who it is you're interviewing. Do your homework. Watch interviews that your guest has done in the past and notice they get asked the same questions over and over and over by very kind, very eager podcast hosts. My favorite thing during an interview I'm hosting is when my guest says, "Good question," or even better, "Nobody has ever asked me that." How would someone practically walk that out?
Man, beautiful. Thanks for doing your homework.
Once you've done your homework, create 2 documents. I want you to create 2 Google Docs, and the first one is going to have a list of easy to read bullet point questions. So you've done your homework, you've done your prep, and now based on that homework, you are trying to create questions that are fresh and new and get your guest thinking. And this is the document that you send to your guest or to their assistant. And make sure to let them know that these are jumping off questions. You want to be able to take the interview wherever works best for the guest and for wherever works best for you. So these questions are just jumping off questions. You also want to tell them, hey, if anything's off limits, we can remove it from the document, no problem. I've had a few guests reach out and say, actually, I would rather not talk about this. And I say, no problem. And that gives them a comfort level. They know that they're coming into an interview with someone who is prepped, that actually has their best interest at heart as well, not just their podcast's best interest.
Sensitive.
The second document you will create will have that same list of bullet points, but go ahead and type out how you want to ask those questions. You want to be concise, heartfelt, and to the point, but you also want to make sure that everything you want to ask gets out. Now, you're not going to share this with your guests. This is only going to be in front of you. As a matter of fact, I'm filming this video right here with a teleprompter, and I film my podcasts with a teleprompter as well. And I have those questions right in front of me. I'm looking straight down the lens into the virtual eyes of whoever my guest is, but I have my questions right there that I can read concisely and with crispy audio, with everything well thought out. I'm not having to remember everything. Nothing's off the cuff. Well, some stuff is off the cuff because we want to take the conversation wherever it naturally goes. But when you want to get to that question, you've already thought out what you want to say. If you actually book the interview you want, chances are you won't get another shot. So make the most of it by preparing and having those questions, not just the bullet points, the questions in front of you that you want to ask. In some of my most important interviews with people I had no business interviewing, I made sure to script out and practice some sort of question or statement that began the interview where I honored them, thanking them for what they have meant to me and how honored I was to have them there. Here's an example. But it was when Gary Vee arrived at the event. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, when he arrived to backstage,
Yes.
loading dock, Grow with
Yes.
Video Live.
And
2022.
yes. And yeah, very recent. And one thing that just really spoke to me is you being a successful creator yourself still walked out and just showed him tons of honor for how his journey has contributed to your journey. And it was this amazing moment. And I kind of wanted just to share with you, like, this is kind of like my Gary Vee moment, if you don't mind me saying. You have been someone that over the years has contributed and been faithful to the content creation community. While you were doing that, you were faithful to Jesus, your faith, faithful to your wife, your kids, and even the Think Media team, constantly giving them credit for your success. So to me, this is a massive honor to have you here. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you for all you've done for us. I wouldn't be a creator, the creator I am, without you. And I'm just very honored to have you. And with that said, like, how are you, man? How are you doing?
Well, first of all, your kind words are incredibly meaningful, and thank you so much for sharing all of that.
I found out later that Sean's assistant shared this opener of my interview with the entire Think Media team at their next staff meeting. Now, think about it. What if I hadn't prepped? What if I just gone into that interview unprepared? See, my hard work paid off so much so that not only was Sean honored in that moment, but his entire team now knows who I am and can be sure that I will be reaching out to each of them for an interview as well. See, prepare your questions in advance. It's only going to help you out. You may be great at conversations.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
But this is going to make you the best. My preparation is on point. And because of that, I've had many of these big name guests offer to give me another interview because they know they're not walking into amateur hour. Scheduling is something that shouldn't be free form. Again, have some in your prep, have some sort of system where guests can sign up for a time that works for them but fits within your schedule. I've been enjoying Calendly, which is a very popular app. I've been enjoying Calendly for this. It's free, it's easy to set up, and it allows guests to pick a time that works for them instead of going back and forth and trying to find a time using Instagram DMs. And speaking of going back and forth, most of these interviews are going to happen remotely. So let's hop on Zoom, right? Just kidding. No, Ooh.
Ew, David.
Zoom is terrible. There are a few apps out there that make interviewing remote guests easy. Now, I throw up air quotes because I've used most of the apps out there and none of them have given me a flawless experience. But the one I tend to lean on as a favorite that has treated me the best over a long period of time is Ecamm Live. StreamYard, Squadcast, Riverside, all of these are great. However, Ecamm Live is a very competitively priced app and it has actually far more features than just remote interview capabilities. So springing for that subscription made sense to me because of all the extras it includes. Plus, it has worked the best over time for me. But regardless of what you choose, apps like Ecamm will record your camera, your guest camera, the program feed, separate audio files. It makes it easy to edit your podcast after the fact. Ecamm records actually separate video files for every camera you use, including your guest, and it records separate audio files for whatever mic your guest is using as well as you. This makes editing in the future way easy. And here's a pro tip. Remember to offer to send your guests all of the raw files you recorded to use in their own content if they so desire. I mean, they might actually tag you, which would be amazing since their following is much larger than yours. It's been shocking to have these amazing conversations and then see what I recorded on the shorts feed of another creator that's much more popular than me. So send them the raw stuff. But the content creation journey doesn't end there. Watch this video. You're gonna love it.